Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And we are all in for a treat today. Of course, largely because I'm in for a treat, but I think you're in for a treat too if you're in the compliance field, because we're going to take data from the basics. And my guest today is Aron Clymer. Aron, first of all, welcome. And thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Tom.
Could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. Yeah. I've been in high tech. I've done Silicon Valley for 20 years, type of enterprise software, enterprise data. And I was in corporate America a long time, most of my career. I'm more recently in 2008 to 2015 kind of time frame. I built the data team at Salesforce. I was living out in San Francisco, and then I was head of data at another company after that. And I then decided I wanted to be really in services and become much more of even a deeper expert at what I do. I'd realized in a decade I'd been at two companies and I'd seen two data sets with two sets of challenges. I wanted to see 50 data sets and 50 sets of different challenges across multiple industries. So professional services was where I needed to be to do that. So I started a professional services firm, and we're here to solve that problem of having data at the fingertips of everybody at a company so that questions can be answered quickly, strategic direction can be understood as quickly as possible, and a company can move at the speed of the world that they're living in.
What's your current role?
I'm founder and CEO of my company I call Data Clymer. I used my last name because it made sense. So the URL was available and it works pretty well. So we are a full stack data engineering firm. So we'll implement data warehouses, cloud data warehousing solutions. In the industry lingo is the modern data stack, which really just means full cloud, very interoperable with lots of different vendors involved. There's not one single vendor that provides a full solution. So you always have to go with 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 vendors to have a complete solution. But the end result is that a company can get all their data in one place, get rid of data silos, make it really business friendly, easy for anybody in the company to access and do their job with a data informed process.
Aron, when you go out on a customer call or a customer comes to you, are you sitting across from a CTO? Are you sitting across from a CEO? Are you talking to a board of directors? Is it all of the above, none of the above, or really just varies between the individual client to client?
Yeah, it really does vary. It's often the CIO, CTO, a lot of even CMO, a lot of C-suite executives. And that's what's so interesting about our space is every company, every vertical, and every department within that company needs data, right? And so you can have these conversations with whoever is leading the charge at an organization when it comes to data. And that can be under many different departments, many hats. So it does vary quite a bit. But we do get more CIO, CTOs than other leaders when we're talking to them.
So I would actually like you to pretend you're sitting across the table from a chief compliance officer, one with a legal background, academically and professionally. And I say that because in 2020, the regulatory body over my area of compliance is the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the Department of Justice, in a public announcement, said that the chief compliance officer and the compliance function of an organization must have access to all data across the organization. It was the first time they had said that publicly. And he said across data silos. I'd like to maybe ask if you could, if I came to you and I say, okay, I've been given this task. I know there's data out there. Where do I start? Just walk me through that as if I'm a novice, because believe me, it's not an act.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I love about this and I love about the space that I'm in and my job is we can do anything. So as long as the data exists, like we can get it done. We do a ton of custom work. And so whatever it takes to do this, the answer is always yes. There's a path to yes in almost anything you need to do as long as the data exists, right? Which we have a ton of data. So that's usually a yes. So the way I would explain this is I'd say first thing is what's beautiful about a central data warehouse for any organization is it takes all of your data and puts it in a single location. So obviously right there, that's huge if you need to understand what kind of data a company has and even find it. Now, this data, though, is coming from all the source systems the company's running on. So a lot of companies these days are running on 20, 30, 40 SaaS applications to run their business. My business runs off at least 20 different applications. So we have a CRM, for instance, using HubSpot in this case. We have a bunch of other sales tools. We have marketing tools, email campaign, stuff like that. We've got financial tools. We're using QuickBooks for our finances. So if we really wanted to bring all that in one place, and get a 360-degree view of our customer or our product or our service, it has to come from all the sources we build data pipelines that bring all that into a central data warehouse. So if you can imagine, if you don't know what data you're going to need to access in the future, you're going to need to have access to all of it because you can't predict exactly what you'll need. The data warehouse would be the perfect place to go because it's already all there. I would think that the next step is then having a catalog or a map of what's in there so that you can discover everything that's in there. And when it comes to compliance specifically, there's a lot of metadata that could really be helpful, right? Like understanding which data comes from which systems, so that when you do find it, you also understand what systems all that data was involved in from the source.
So I've got a warehouse. We've started to map the data. How do I think about actually gaining access? Is that something you and Data Clymer can help me with, or do I need to go down the hall and buy my CTO or CISO a pizza and say, we're in for a long conversation?
No, and this is another thing I love about this space. It's become the tools to access the data have become so much more friendly than they were even 5 years ago. So just the user friendliness and the UX of these tools has become so easy that any employee in a company should be able to access data very easily. And yes, that's exactly what we would help with. So I mentioned at the beginning, there's multiple vendors that come with a data solution. If you're working with us, we would recommend one of 5 very best-in-class business intelligence tools, I'll call them, or data access tools, analytical tools. But in a nutshell, what they give you is access to all the data that you should have access to. There's always security permissions around data, but all these tools will handle all that security access permission and allow you to access whatever data you can at the lowest grain possible. So really all the data, and allow you to explore it in a way that you don't need to be technical, right? You just really can just drag and drop fields essentially into a window and click run, and you're executing a query against your data warehouse live. So you can explore ad nauseum all the data you have.
Aron, I ask you to describe a process or a protocol around compliance, but what I also heard you answer was, this is just good business. Why haven't you been doing this all along? Or maybe it's time to get moving to the 2020s and actually find out what's in your own data and use that going forward. Are you having those types of conversations as well?
Oh, yes, that is the number one reason that we're doing what we do, is to show businesses how to extract the value of all the data they have. And it definitely takes some long-term thinking and some investment. You really want to do it right. You want to build a foundation that's going to scale and grow with your business indefinitely. And that takes some foresight, I should say, right? So if companies don't think about it too hard, they might jump in, buy a few tools, spin up a database here or there, start doing data, but it becomes the Wild West, huge mess down the road and very costly to fix later. I think it's worth the effort to think it through and model your data in a consistent way and put some governance around it, again, some security and some process, so that the data it's really easy to answer questions and not question the data. You have to trust the data before it becomes valuable. So you have to make sure you build trust into a system. So you do all this right, and then you can start building on top of that and iterating and growing as your company grows and changes. New data sources come in all the time. You're always generating new data. So to bring that in a structured way and make it accessible, yes, that's how you're going to get the value out of data. It's going to be able to answer the questions you want it to answer. And to be able to always do that, and to be able to do that at scale and across all of your employees, we would say you democratize your data across everybody, and they should all be able to answer their questions self-service through one of these tools I'm talking about that makes it really easy to answer those questions.
Let me go back to your answer specifically around accessing data and analyzing it. When it comes to asking those questions or writing those queries, I may know some questions I would like to explore, but do I need to work with a data technician, a data scientist, or perhaps someone from your team to actually write those queries to run the data?
No, not at all. So let's take an example. Actually, do you have a good example of a data set that you'd be working with?
Sure. I'd like to see the gift, travel, and entertainment spend for salesmen or salespersons in France. I'd like to see who is above the $75 that they have, where they have to have no approval. Above that, they have to have pre-approval above that. I'd like to see So it's $75. So let's look at $74 and above. How would I access that information?
Got it. Okay. So let me answer that in a couple ways. Start with the very high level. Assuming that you're actually, let's say you're new to the role, you're new to the company, and you have this question, you need to do some analysis around what you just said, but you don't even know where the data is exactly. But you've been given a system, you've been told there is this tool where all of the data is accessible, and we've set you up with the right permissions. You can go in. You probably need an hour or two of training on how to use this tool, right? It's a business intelligence tool. So Sigma Computing is one full cloud tool. It actually has a spreadsheet interface. So you're already familiar with how to use a spreadsheet. It's fairly easy to understand how to use this kind of tool. It's hooked up directly live to all this data in data warehouse, right? So you might have the tool itself, and then you might have a data catalog somewhere else. You might have another vendor who has surfaced all of the data definitions, gives you a map of where it all is. So you say, hey, I need to know where all that transactional data is for, is it all the spend from all the sales team or whatever it is. And this tool will tell you, okay, yeah, you need to go to this data set. It's called this, and it has these fields, and this is what it all means. And so it should be very self-service and very clear how to use the data. Then you go to the BI tool, you go to that data set, and you start asking the questions directly. So you're not writing queries, and nobody's helping you ideally. Again, you probably need some training. You can't do this without any training, but just a few hours of training, and you should be able to start asking simple questions of the data. And again, in these BI tools, it's literally drag and drop. So you should see a set of fields, and one of them would be the transaction amount, one would be the name of the person, whatever you need. And then you can filter and sort and pivot and all that, just like you would in Excel. The difference is it's live data against a trusted data source that the data team has curated for you.
What if I wanted to try to visualize or have a visual representation of the data? How would I go about getting that type of visual report or visual summary that might give me greater insight, since I'm a lawyer and I can't add two and two?
Yeah. And again, these tools do a great job of visualizing. They often will already have a graph ready to go, depending on what you're looking at. And they're smart enough to recommend almost the right graph that you might need. So if you're looking at trended data, it'll show you a trend, but it's very easy to just tell the tools, hey, I want to see a bar chart or a line chart or a pie chart, whatever you want to look at based on your results. And then of course, every time you add a filter or you add a field, it'll update the chart. So creating visualizations and telling a story with the data becomes, again, more of a self-service, very easy thing for anybody in the company to do.
Let me change the focus just a little bit, Aaron, and ask about the role of data and ESG. And I preface this by saying, number one, I see data and data governance as directly within the G of ESG, perhaps the other two as well. But I see this as a key component of an ESG program. And that, of course, includes not only data governance, but data cleansing, data integrity, and a lot of the things you've mentioned. But I was wondering, what are your thoughts around the role of data within ESG?
Yeah, so I think data is critical for all of that. And I think that for all the reasons you mentioned, you've got to have clean, trusted, the ability to access it. You got to be able to do what you need to do with the data. I think it's critical. Maybe is there a more specific question in there about?
Do you often or from time to time either counsel or work with boards of directors to help them understand their role in data governance, recognizing that's oversight? It's not getting into the weeds. But are you seeing boards perhaps finally getting to the point where they understand that data governance and the use of that data is critical for their business to succeed in the long term from an oversight, once again, board perspective?
Yeah, I got it. Okay. And it's very interesting to me. I don't see that as much as I thought I would. I imagine what's happening is that a few compliance or governance applications might be purchased and placed on top of the data, but I don't actually see a lot of the use of that or the implementation of that to a degree where it's thought of as critical for the business. And so I've been surprised myself at how little of that I've actually seen. The focus has been really more on the business side of the data in my experience. And again, we don't do a lot of that necessarily, that work. So it could be I'm a little biased because our clients are not necessarily coming to us with those asks. But I would think we would at least be involved in some of those projects in more depth if they were big priorities for our clients.
Aaron, where do you see the importance of the work you're doing in data and, frankly, the education you're providing to a wide variety of corporate disciplines who may not understand the need for data analysis as much as you do? Where do you see this down the road in 2030? Is this going to be a true market differentiator, or is this now just table stakes to be a
That's a great question. I think it's still a market differentiator and a way to create a competitive advantage even today, because, like I alluded to at the beginning, not a lot of companies are doing this really well, right? Still, most organizations are still in the infancy stages of doing data warehousing specifically and applying it to the business in ways that really impacts the top line and the bottom line. It's there and it's happening for sure. But I think it's still enough that it's still new enough that a competitive advantage is really a clear thing now. In 10 years, yeah, it may be more table stakes, but I think what'll happen is that the folks that have started now will be that much more ready to still create a competitive advantage by doing much more advanced things with their data, because they've been doing it for long enough that they do it well and they've got all the basics down, and so they can continue to stay ahead of the curve. That's going to be an interesting question.
Aaron, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering before we leave if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself, on Data Clymer, or really any of the topics we've touched on. Where should they go for more information?
Yeah, they can go to our website. I think that's the best place to go. It's dataclymer.com, and Clymer is spelled Clymer. And we've got all the information you need on there. You can contact me directly on the website as well.
Aaron, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for your time.